Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Ryan Shaplinski. Today we're going to be covering budgets and change orders in ProjectHQ in this webinar. The content that we have to cover today, we are scheduled for an hour. It won't take quite an hour, so we will have some time for questions at the end. You do have a question box in the GoToMeeting menu, so if you have any questions, you can type them in there, and then we'll get them answered either as we're going through the session here today, or at the end, depending on what the question is. So again, we're going to look at the budgeting and the change order entry here within ProjectHQ. So the first thing we'll take a look at is how the budgets get into ProjectHQ. So budgets are going to be set up in Foundation along with jobs, and we would load and set up jobs the same way that we always have, whether we're using ProjectHQ or not. So we'd set up jobs in Foundation. We can import a budget from Excel. You can enter a budget directly onto that job. And so I've already got that accomplished. I've got a job in Foundation that has a budget on it. So the first step, at least in this case, is going to be to get that job imported into ProjectHQ. So we're going to go to our project list, use our ellipsis button here to import projects from Foundation. The job I set up today for our example is this one called Budget Job. So again, this job in Foundation has a budget loaded. We had an address on that. So we're going to pull that here into ProjectHQ. That project is now created. If I look in my list here, 22061, my budget job is at the very bottom of my list. When that job is imported into HQ, the budget does not automatically go with it. And there is a good reason for that. Because you can import more than one job at a time, we do have to limit the amount of budgets that we're importing at once. If you try to import 50 jobs and every job had 20 line items in it, it's going to take a very, very long time to the point where the browser might time out. So there is a good reason why we're not pulling the budget automatically, and that is because you can import more than one job. So if we pull the budget automatically, then we have to force you to just do one job at a time, which isn't going to work either. So now that that job is created, if we navigate into that project from the list here, the budget can be found under cost management, and actually the change orders are going to be found here as well. So under cost management, we have our budget for our job, which is currently blank. If we select this, what's going to come up here, because this job is linked to a job in Foundation, since we imported it from Foundation, we can see that we do have a budget that can be imported. So we're simply going to click this button. So it's very, very easy here. We just have to click the button in the budget to import that over. And then it's going to copy any information that we have in our budget in Foundation. It's going to copy that here to ProjectHQ. Now, it is important to make sure that this is done. Just the way that it works in Foundation. In Foundation, in the accounting software, when you go to put in any expenses, you can only put expenses to a job under the cost codes that are on the budget. Same thing here. Now, we're not entering expenses in HQ, but when I go to enter a change order, or if I go to put in a committed cost like a PO or a subcontract, it's only going to show us the budgets, the cost codes that are on the budget of the job here in HQ. If you have a budget in Foundation, but you don't have a budget here, you're not going to be able to put a cost code into a change order or into a PO. So we do have to make sure that this budget's copied over, because it will function the same here as it does in Foundation. We can only enter change orders or commitments to the line items or cost codes that we have on a budget. If you are a company that uses phases, nothing changes. All of this is exactly the same. You just would see phases as part of your job cost structure and part of your budget here. When you went to enter a PO, for example, you would enter phase, cost code, and cost class. So this functionality in ProjectHQ does not change whether you are phased or not. You have that one additional field. If you don't know what I'm talking about when I say phases, then this is not for you. If you don't have phases turned on in Foundation, then it does not matter. So this is just 100% a view of the budget, meaning there isn't any edits you can do here. You cannot add any line items at this time. This is just displaying what was in Foundation and pulling it over. That means that if there's a change to this budget, and these changes to the budget should be minimal or non-existent. Once you have your budget set, it would change via a change order. We're not going into the budget and making changes. But if there was something that needed to change in the budget, we would go into Foundation and update that in the accounting software. And then here in ProjectHQ, we're going to select this sync button here at the top, And this is going to be used to make sure that what we have here in HQ is exactly what we have in Foundation. And in my case, there wouldn't have been any changes, but that would pick up whatever the most recent budget information is. Some users do choose to create a new cost code called change order 1, and then another cost code called change order 2, and keep going with that same logic. So if that is the process that you use as a company, then every time you have a change order, we're going to go into Foundation, create that cost code, add it to the budget, sync the budget here, and then enter our change order. But we've got to make sure that any new budget line items that are going to get added through a change order, they get added to the budget first at $0, since there was no original budget for that line item. We're adding it with the change order, and then we can enter the change order against that new cost code. Okay, so we've got our budget pulled over here, and that's really it as far as budgeting goes. So now as we go to adjust that budget, we can enter requests for change order and change orders, which would then go in and revise this budget. Again, if there was any new line items, we're going to add those new line items in Foundation first at $0. Then we're going to do our change order here. In the change management section, so this will be our first change order for this job. There are two different records that we can create here. One record would be a request for change order, or we call it RFC here. Other terminology, you may call it a COR, you may call it a PCO, potential change order. That's what Procore calls them. It's all the same thing, tomato, tomato. It's a precursor to a change order. Technically, users do not have to use the RFCs. We can create a pending change order. You can email it from the ProjectHQ website. You can go through all the motions of getting it approved and priced up. And then once it's approved, we can then push it into Foundation so it updates the accounting software. And you can do all of that without using the RFC. I do always encourage people to use the RFCs. They're there for a reason. They do provide some additional benefit. Number one, if you request X dollars on a change request and you get approved for Y dollars, if those amounts could be different, you'll have some visibility of that. If you try to do that all in a change order, you're just going to have to modify your change order or create a whole new one. So if we're doing this in the RFCs, we can see that we had an RFC for 10 grand, and then our change order that's linked to that RFC would be for, say, 8 grand. So you have some visibility of that difference in the pricing versus what you're requesting and getting. The other advantage is that you have the ability to take multiple RFCs and roll them up into one change order. So I know this is pretty common in the industry where, we send out several different requests. We probably even start doing the work, and we're still waiting for those approvals to come back. And in some cases, the owner, GC, customer, whoever's approving these, may just approve them all at once and say, okay, make these 3 requests, change order 1. And so you can very, very easily do that when we're converting RFCs into change orders, and it doesn't cost you anything extra. The RFC entry screen is exactly the same as the change order entry screen. If you enter an RFC and we use this function to convert the RFC to a change order, you click a button to do it. You don't have to re-enter anything. So there's definitely advantages of using the RFCs. I would use them. That's why they're there, but technically you don't have to. As long as we have the saved change order updating and pushed into Foundation, then our numbers are going to get changed and the reporting would all be accurate. So we will go in here, and our example that we're going to do for this is going to be to create an RFC. We're going to convert it to a change order, and then we're going to push that change order into Foundation so that it updates our accounting system and reflects in all of our numbers and in our new contract value. So we'll click the Create RFC button here. Like all of the documents in HQ, this will be numbered automatically. This is my first request for change order for this job. So it's going to be RFC number 1. I can change that if I want, but it can only be a number. The allowable characters there are 0 through 9. If you do have other identifying information, or you have maybe, spec section, or a number with a dash in it or a letter in it, you do have other fields that you can use for that as far as title. You can create, there's a description here. You can create your own custom fields to put any of that info in. So I would recommend just letting the system number these sequentially. The title of our change order. So this is where you want to do a good title or a good subject line. If we're looking at a list of all the change orders or a list of all the RFCs in this case, column A in the list is going to show us the number, and column B is going to show the title. So if you just put something generic here or you don't do a good description, you're not really going to know what this thing is for when you're looking at that list. So I'm going to do kind of a generic description here. You probably want to be a bit more descriptive than that. So we need to run some more electrical to the second floor of this commercial building. That's going to be my make-believe example here. So then the status of our request for change order. So we're in an RFC still. These typically go in as pending, right? Once we get the approval on this, we're going to change that status and we're going to flip it to approved. When it comes to converting requests for change or RFCs into change orders, it only lets you do that for the ones that are approved. You can't convert a pending RFC into a change order. It's still pending. So we will need to come and change the status once we go through and get this approved. Then there's some basic identifying information here. None of these fields are required, but we have whether this is going to be adding new scope to the job or this is changing, adding or deducting from the existing scope. And that's just informational. You can print this on the change order. It just shows up when you look at it. It's not really going anywhere else or controlling anything else. So we'll say this is going to be in the scope. I have electrical as part of my job already. I'm just going to add additional electrical work here with this change order. The reason for the change order, and again, not required, you don't have to put this in, and you can also create your own reasons for change order here. So it's kind of like a category, if you will, and you can create your own. So just a way for you to label these. How is this going to impact my schedule? Is this going to add or deduct days from the schedule? So you can put either a positive or a negative here to identify the number of days that this change order is going to affect the schedule. And in our case here, the schedule will remain the same. And we'll say that this was an owner change. So they wanted to add additional electrical. The date we created this, that is required. All the fields with the red star or asterisk, that is a required field. So this is just the date we created it. The date we send or receive it. So maybe it takes us a day or two to get it priced up and get all the information in here. So the days could be different created compared to sent. And then if we want a due date on this. So, hey, I'd like a response by the end of June. You can go ahead and select that date here. And then throughout the reporting in HQ, the widgets are going to show you what documents are overdue. You can run reports like the RFC log to show you what's overdue. And if we have a due date, we can tell you when something's overdue. If we don't have this due date or respond by date, same thing, we cannot tell you if this is overdue or approaching the due date. So it is a good field to use, even though it's not required. And you can make it required if you did want this to be part of any of your entries, or all of your entries, I should say. There is a very large description box here. For anyone who may be familiar with entering change orders in the Foundation accounting system, and I promise I won't draw a bunch of comparisons to that. We're looking at change order entry here in HQ. But if you have seen that entry in Foundation, this is going to be the comment box. So this is basically where you can type up the description of what this change order is. And this is where we start to get into some of the variation in how these change orders can be entered. So right off the bat in ProjectHQ, there's 3 different printable forms. If I'm going to print or email this change order, you have 3 different selections to start with. Plus, you can create your own. You can have as many of these as you want. And in one of those forms, we're only printing the total amount of the change order. That's it, just the grand total. If we were going to use that form, if we were able just to say, here, customer, here's your change order for $10,000, and not have to break that down into any line items or identify any unit costs or anything, we could use that form or that template that says just print the totals only. And in that case, we would use the description field here to type in what the description of the change order is. What is the scope of work? What are we adding? Is there any insurance considerations here or anything like that? However you would describe this change order to whoever's approving it. This is what we call a rich text box. It's 32,000 characters, so there's plenty of space here. And if you run out of room, you can add your own custom field. So add another 10,000 character note box if you need it. But you do have plenty of space here. You can change the font style and color. You can actually do carriage returns here for those of us old enough to know what a carriage return is. You can make this window full screen if you did want more space to see what's going on here in this field. You can make the text bold, change the font color and size, so you can make it look nice. And you can also insert hyperlinks into this. So if you have a link to some website, or maybe there's some product data on a vendor's website or something that you want to direct them to, you can insert hyperlinks into this. You would put a website address here and then how you want the text to appear in this description section. This correspondence section works the same in all of our documents. So it's going to default sent from me, since that's who I'm logged in as here. Who are we going to send this to? I can pick from any company and any person in my contact list. The ones that have a symbol in front of the name, what that means is you can pick them. I can identify this is who I'm sending this to, but you're not going to be able to email it from ProjectHQ. We don't have an email address on this company. So my save and send button here is grayed out because I have a contact selected that has that symbol in front of the name. If I pick someone like myself with no symbol, then I can do my save and send, and what comes up here, and we'll see what these look like. This is those three different templates. So how does my change order look? Which template am I emailing this or quote unquote printing this on when I send this to Ryan? I'm not going to do it here in this example just because it would look funny if my name was in here 3 times, but I do recommend that you copy yourself on these. If we're using the save and send button to send documents from ProjectHQ, it is a system generated email. We're not connected to your mail server. We're not sending this email through your Outlook, which means it does not show up in your outbox. If you copy yourself, then you're going to see these emails come through your inbox and outbox as you send them out and as we get replies. So that's just, I guess, kind of a pro tip. Copy yourself on there. That way this email activity is going to show up in your mailbox in Outlook. If you don't copy yourself, all the email activity would be tracked in ProjectHQ. And there isn't anything that's going to jump out and say, you've got mail. So copying yourself on there is always a good practice. All of our documents have these bottom sections here, custom fields. So if there's something missing or I want to add additional fields or maybe ask questions here, you can create additional custom fields here. And then there also is a spot where we can put attachments. So on change orders, maybe I am just doing the one that says totals only, and I'm printing a very basic cover sheet for my change order, but then maybe I attach a bunch of backup to that, right? Maybe we got pricing sheets and however we came up with that amount, and whatever you may need to show your customer, whoever's approving these, those things can be attached here to the change order. And if we email this, those attachments are going to be included in the body of the email. So the main area of this, where we put the amounts, where we put the line items, where we identify the electrical cost code that's going to be affected by this, really the meat and potatoes of the change order and RFC entry is the scope of work section right here. So this is where we're going to accomplish 3 different things. The first thing here, what are the totals of my change order? And there's 2 different totals. There's the total change to the contract. How much is the customer's price changing? And then there's the total cost to you. How much is your estimated cost going to change? So those 2 totals are going to come from what we enter here. We can add line items to this. So if we think about the change order in terms of a printable form, they would get added. We can add additional line items here. If we have a printable form, the body of the form is what we're populating by adding line items here. And this is where there's flexibility. Some contractors, they type up line items here, and there's one line for labor and how many hours we're adding for this change order. There's another line for material with the total price for material, maybe another line for profit and overhead. There's a bunch of different ways that you can enter this in. There's a lot of flexibility here. We're populating the line items. And then there's other contractors that might put more detail into a line item. You can put in, for example, a description here. Maybe I do underground utilities. So I'm installing 200 more feet of sewer pipe or something. So maybe my change order description is install additional 6-inch sewer pipe, quantities 200, unit of measures foot, unit price is $20 a foot or whatever it costs. Because when I show that change order to the owner or the customer, that's what they need to see. They need to see how many more feet of trench we have to dig, how many more feet of pipe we're putting in, what the labor per foot of pipe is. And there's a printable form that prints all that detail. The third thing we're accomplishing here, so the totals, the line items that are going to show on our form, and then the third thing is what we call our budget impact. In Foundation, we call it distribution. Here we call it budget impact. Again, potato, potato, it's the same thing, just got a different name to it. What we're doing is we're taking the cost of our change order, however much my total estimated cost is going to change by, and we're breaking it down into our budget. If I say I'm going to spend another $8 grand on this change order, that's great, but what's it for? Is it more labor? Is it more material? In my case, is it more electrical cost code? Is it more HVAC cost code? You know, your cost codes would all be different, but we need to break this change order down into our actual budget and into our cost codes. So those three things we're accomplishing here, and this is where there's flexibility with, you know, one contractor might enter it one way, another contractor might enter it a completely different way, and then use different printable forms. And maybe in one case, or for some customers, I can print you a change order that just has a paragraph description and a total price. And then for another contractor, I've got to show you the labor, the material, and the breakdown. You're going to do that all here. It's going to be determined by how you enter, what you enter here, and then which form you print that change order on, or what you select when you go to email. A couple questions came up here regarding the emailing, so we'll go ahead and knock those out here before we dive into this. First question is, do the attachments get added to the change order document, or are they separate documents in the email? I can show you what one looks like here, and I'm going to show you an example of a submittal, but the idea is the same. Wrong one. Okay, so this is how the attachments show up. It's linkable, it's a hyperlink. It's text in the body of the email that is a hyperlink to your Dropbox, your OneDrive, your Google Drive, wherever this file lives. And so the recipient of this email would be able to click on the links to then follow these into your Dropbox or OneDrive to see those attachments. So to answer your question, it's neither. It doesn't go into the PDF. It's not attaching separate things to the email. It is just creating links to those attachments in Dropbox or Google Drive or OneDrive. The other question was, can you preview your email before you hit send? You cannot. These are all the same. So aside from the text that you're entering, the emails will all look the same. So what's going to come out of here is basically this, and then the information in the body will change if it's a submittal versus an RFC, but there's not any way to preview this. If you hit save and send, it just automatically generates the email. Now, you can email it to yourself and then forward it to whoever it needs to go to. I mean, there's definitely ways to work around that, but we tried to make this as quick and efficient as possible, so it is just automatically sending that email out. So last question here with the emails that came through is, said, what if they don't have access to your Google Drive or your Dropbox? That's the whole idea with how this works. We're not granting them access to your entire Dropbox or to navigate through your folders there. It is a one-time link. I shouldn't say one-time, but it's just a link to that one file. So if I were to follow those links, it's just going to open up the PDF or whatever the attachment was. I can't navigate anywhere else. And this is part of the design of Google Drive, Dropbox, and OneDrive. So you're able to share these files that may live out there without having to grant access to your actual file hosting service. So all those links will just allow the recipient of that email to navigate to that one file. They're not going to be in there looking at anything else. Correct, Roseanne. You would not have to grant them access to anything else. All right, so then to the scope of work section here. So first off, I'm just going to work through this top to bottom, left to right. And I'm going to show the functionality here. We'll do a couple different examples. But again, there's a bunch of different ways that you can enter this depending on what you do as a company, and then who you're sending this to and how the recipient of this request for change needs this to look and what information they need to see. First thing here is we can apply markups to this. So there's two markups. There's one that we call a default markup here. and then the other one is an overhead markup. So I'm going to go ahead and throw one in here, and then I'll show you where this goes. Pretty simple how they work. So I'll show you where that goes. When we go to enter this, do we want to break down our budget per line item, or do we just want to break down our budget once in this change order? That's basically what this consolidated budget entry button is doing. My recommendation to anyone who's ever entered a change order into Foundation or just in general is to turn this on. In my opinion, it's easier and more efficient to enter this way. The difference is if this is turned off, then for every line item that I add to my change order here or my RFC, I'm going to click this green button and I'm going to identify how that one line item affects my budget. I'm going to take whatever the cost of this item is and break that down into a budget. And if I have 10 line items, I'm doing that 10 times. Might be easier to do it that way. Maybe every line item is a cost code. So maybe it's easier to do it that way for some users. If this is turned on, then whatever the total cost of my change order is, if I have one line item or if I have 100 line items, I'm going to click the add budget impact and I'm going to break it all down once. I can pick multiple cost codes, multiple cost classes, and break this down where it needs to be broken down to. So I find this easier just doing it once rather than per line item. And then this also makes it work like it does in Foundation. In Foundation, you have a distribution tab, you fill that out, and that breaks down your cost. So this kind of makes it do the same thing. How you do the budget impact is the same. It's just whether or not you have to do it per line item or you do it for the entire change order. So when we get to that part, I'll show you what that looks like once we break this one down. So my first example here is going to be one where we just print the totals only. The customers that I do work for, they just need to see a description of what the change order is and then whatever the price of the change order is. They don't need to see anything else. And so when I go to print this or email this, I'm going to use the form that says totals only. Even if I'm not printing any line items, I'm printing the form that says totals only, you have to fill something in here. This field's required no matter what. So if I know that this is not going to print, it doesn't matter what you type here. I could put CO. Then I would go over to my totals. And with my markup in here, it does not let me put in my price. I have a markup in there, so what it's looking for is you put in your cost, and then it marks it up that 8%, and then it gives you the price. If I want to have more control over this, I get rid of my markup. That came from setting my default row markup here. I can just delete that. It just fills it in automatically, and I can say, you know what? We can squeeze a little more profit out of that. We're going to do 10 grand here. Then what I would do is take, so where the math works out here, so my 8 grand is my cost, 10 grand is my change to the contract. That's what the customer GC is going to approve. We take this 10 grand and we mark it up that 10% for overhead. So 10,000 times 10% equal, add that all up, gives us 11,000. So it's an $11,000 change order that's going to cost me 8 grand, making good profit on that. And if I'm printing the form that says totals only, the only other thing that I have to do here is break this down into my budget. Yeah, you're spending 8 grand more. Great. Where? Is it more labor, more material? What's affected here? We do that in the budget impact button. So in this lump sum type example, what we're going to say here is this is all electrical. So you're going to pick from your cost codes on your budget. Find my electrical code. Under my budget for electrical, I could do labor, material, sub, owned equipment, rented equipment. Under mechanical, I only budgeted materials. So again, this is looking at the budget. If I didn't budget labor on my job for mechanical, then I can't enter a change order for it. We have to add labor under mechanical in the budget first, sync the budget to HQ, and then we can enter this. So this works exactly like it does in Foundation now. It only lets you pick from cost codes and classes that are on the budget. Same thing here. I don't have labor or sub or equipment under mechanical. I do have it under electrical. you can add labor hours to this. So of my $8,000 here, let's just do nice, easy round math and say 4,000 is labor and 4,000 is material. And I'm sure you guys know yours are going to be more broken down more than that and more detailed. We'll keep this one simple. Now for this $4,000, how many hours am I adding to the job? If you select the labor cost class here, or any of the cost classes really, it expands or slides this over to another window, and you can put in how many hours makes up that $4,000. So maybe this is 80 hours. Then you can click the labor class to go back. And at least with this very easy example, we're done. When I send this out, and I'll show you what this looks like here in a second, we'll email this. This line item's not going to be in the form. It's not going to be part of the change order we're sending them. So then back on this prior screen, if I'm using that form, this is where I want to type in my scope of work. And we're just going to do that. Sure. Okay. So then from here, we can send this off. So we're going to do another one too. I'll show you another example. But we're going to email this one off so we can see what this form looks like. And this is the easy lump sum totals only form. So when I go to email this, I'm going to pick the one that says totals only. Okay, so it'll take a second for that to hit my inbox. So we're going to go in and do another example, and I'll show you what these look like when we're done. And again, this one is the basic, lump sum. So we now have a pending RFC. So if we fast forward in time a little bit, let's say that we send this RFC out, we email it to the recipient, they reply back. All of those emails are going to be in the mailbox here in HQ. Because each time we send this, the project email address is copied there. So all this is going to show up there. So if we fast forward in time a bit, let's pretend we get this approved. So now we want to convert it to a change order. What we're going to do here is the first thing is we have to change the status. It's no longer pending. So we're going to go into our open RFCs. The quickest way to go edit this, and that's what we have to do, we have to edit this to change the status, is going to be to hover here over this line. And then if you slide over here to the right, we can select edit. We're simply going to change the status here from pending to approved. And that's really it. We're not going to do anything else here. We're going to go ahead and hit the save button. And then if we go back, so this is just a view of the document. I could email this from here if I need to email it again. I could print it. I can create an action item for it if I need somebody to follow up on it or take some action on this document. We're going to go back here. And there's two places you can click the convert button. Either from the change management landing page, which is this guy. You can click convert to CO here. Or if we go into a list, there's a convert button here at the top as well. And we would have to look at our close ones. When we hit convert, it is only going to show us RFCs that are not linked to change orders already that are no longer pending. So in my case, of course, this is the one we have for this job. So that's the one that shows up here. If there was 3 or 4 RFCs, you'd see those listed here. Each time you check a box and hit convert, that creates one change order. So if you had 5 RFCs here and you wanted those 5 to become one change order and roll into one, you just would check all 5 boxes and then hit convert. Otherwise, you pick one, convert, save it, pick the next one, convert, save it, and just do them sequentially so you're creating one change order per RFC. process here is very simple. Check the box, hit convert, it's going to do its thing. It's copying and pasting the information from the RFC into the change order. So this is now the change order entry. Aside from this, you wouldn't really know it. It looks exactly the same. In my system, I do have some custom fields on my change order that I don't have on my RFC. So at least for me, there's a slight difference because I customize the change order entry. But otherwise, everything else is exactly the same. If I were to go to my budget entry here, all that pulls over. A question came in here regarding the budget and the consolidated budget. It says, if you're going to use the consolidated budget impact, do you need to fill in the extended cost under the scope of work? It seems like double entry. You do, because you could have more than one line item here. So what we're doing is we're taking whatever the grant, it's really looking at this number here at the top, which is the sum of the cost of all of my line items. We're going to take that extended cost and break that down into our budget. So I guess I don't disagree with you. It's kind of double entry, but it's not at the same time. In one place, we're putting in the total change to our estimated cost, and in the other place, we're breaking that down into the cost code. So in my case, one cost code had all of that cost, but it could be broken down to different ones. All right, and another question came in here. We might wait till the end on this one. Have you been typing that the whole time we've been on this? No, big question. We'll come back to that one, Michael. All right. So I just wanted to show here how this all copies over. So we're now in a change order. We've copied our now approved RFC into a change order. At this point, it's already approved. We could just go push it to foundation. As long as there's not any other changes that are going to have to happen here, we want to make sure that we go through all the motions of getting it priced up and getting it approved and making revisions. We're doing all of that in the RFC. By the time we're converting this to a change order, we're just going to push it to foundation. We have a done, ready, approved change order. Some users have chosen to email this to the accounting team. So what's going to happen here is we're going to push this into foundation, and then there is an import in foundation that needs to be done. And the accounting team is not going to get any kind of notification automatically. There's nothing in foundation that jumps out and says, oh, you've got a new change order you have to import. So what some users have chosen to do is at this point where I have this now approved, got to pick my status here. Let's pick my status of approved, where I now have this new approved change order. I'm going to pick to send this to, and it's going to be me again, but that's my accounting team. And I can do my save and send here. So they get that email notification that says, hey, there's this approved change order. If you go into foundation, it's going to be there. The message won't actually say those words, but that would be the intent of us emailing this to the accounting team. In my case, I'm my accounting team, so I don't need to notify myself. So in the top right here, our save button is broken down into two little mini buttons. The word save would just save this in ProjectHQ. The arrow would allow us to save this in ProjectHQ and push it to foundation. You also can push things to foundation from this screen. And the way that we get here, I always point this out, maybe I make more of a bigger deal out of it than I have to, but when you go into documents and you click on the landing pages here, when you select a document from this list, it takes you to a view of the document. So I can't edit anything here. If I want to edit this, then I click edit. But from here, we can look at what was entered. We can look at the scope of work and the breakdown of the budget. When we're talking about submittals and RFIs, there's different information that would show here. We can see any attachments that were put on this RFC, or in this case, this change order. We can upload attachments from here. We would see the mail by and email the change order, but all the emails for this change order would show here. If I was in that RFC, we'd see where we emailed that to me. And then the actions button is really the big one. You can push change orders to foundation from here. So I just saved this. I didn't push it to foundation. It's not like you're dead in the water now. You still can push this into the accounting software. Before we go into foundation, let's take a look at that change order just so you can see this template. So here is the RFC that comes over. Description of what it is. Here is my example of where you can type in 32,000 characters worth of a description. So you can go nuts there typing what this is going to be for. Our breakdown of our price. Didn't have any attachments here. If I did, they'd be links that I can click to then view the attachments in the file hosting service. And then this is the form that I keep talking about. So from this line here up, you have that same form. All the forms are the same. From this line down, that's my terms and conditions. And I don't have terms and conditions, so I just pasted something else in there. But this is the same exact form you have. And the big takeaway on this one, the one that says totals only, it's not printing anything but the total price. I could have typed in 20 line items into that scope of work section. Wouldn't have mattered. This is still going to look the same. So this is the easiest lump sum, least amount of entry. If you can get away with sending this off and this is all they get and they can approve it, then I would do it this way. This is the easiest way of getting them out. You don't have to type up line items or break things down. We're going to do one more here real quick. Same example. Pending RFC. Would email it to myself. And this is what's going to be different is the scope of work section. So here, I'm going to do my markups again. I'm going to consolidate my budget entry. I think that's the way to go. It's the easiest way of doing it. And now the difference is I'm going to have one line. We're going to add 80 hours of labor. My labor cost is $65 an hour. That includes my burden and union fringes and all that fun stuff. We mark that up 8%, which means we bill $70.20 per hour for labor. Then we're going to install I don't have a good example. We're just going to say this is materials. And our materials are, it's different units of measure, right? I'm doing electrical, so it's feet of conduit, it's eaches of switch plate covers, you know, there's different units of measure, different quantities, different unit costs. But I know the total cost of my material is $6,000. Then we're going to add one more row here. We also need to write a scissor lift. And we're going to need that for 20 hours. And we get it from ABC Rentals for $40 an hour, but we mark that up 8%, so we'll get $43.20 an hour for it. So the main difference here is I'm typing up line items. When I go to print this, I'm probably not going to do the one that says totals only. I'm going to pick one of the forms that prints these line items. Am I just going to print the description and the price? Or do I need to print description, quantity, unit measure, and unit price, and price subtotal? That's the difference between the two forms that have line items. One prints quantity, unit of measure, and unit price, and the other does not. Then we can do our budget impact. So where am I at here? So if we add up our line items, so taking my cost, marking it up 8%, gives me $12,960. Then we take the 10% that I put in for overhead, we add that to the $12,960, and the total price of my change order is $14,256. Cost of my change is $12,000. This is what I need to break down into my budget. So we'll do the same thing. We'll add our budget impact. This is going to look the same. It's all electrical. I have 80 hours at $65 an hour. So it just calculates that amount for me, same way it did here. I have materials at $6,000. And I'm going to rent equipment for, I can add hours here, 20 hours at $40 an hour. So this is keeping track of, did I distribute all that cost? If my total of my budget here does not add up to the total cost of my change, I cannot move forward. These numbers have to tie out. So again, pretty much the same example, and I'm sure your change orders are going to be broken down more for the sake of time and to make this as engaging as possible. We're not going to sit here and go through every single scenario. But you could break down more than one cost code into that. Maybe my change is adding a whole nother room onto, this building or whatever. So it's more HVAC, it's more electrical, it's more carpentry, all that stuff gets affected. You can break down the total cost of the change into however many different cost codes and cost classes are needed. Just so we can see what this one looks like in a minute, I'm going to email the detail with unit price. So the most detailed version of the change order. And while we're waiting for that email to come through so we can see what that form looks like, we'll take a look at the importing in Foundation. So on the one that we already got approved, we pushed it to Foundation, potentially emailed that to the accounting team so they know it's there. So then in Foundation, if we're back here on the main menu, in Job Costing Daily, there's a thing here called Change Order Sync. That just means import changes from HQ. That's all it does. So whoever on the accounting team, a lot of times it is the accounting team. In some cases, it's maybe like an operations person that comes in and does this. Whoever's going to do it, someone on the accounting side needs to approve these. We're not just taking everything that comes from the operations side and updating the accounting system. Accounting folk don't like that. So there's got to be some visibility of what is going in and affecting my WIP and my accounting. So we'll go into Change Order Sync here. This is going to show a list of all of the change orders sent from ProjectHQ that have not been imported yet. I can narrow that list down by job or date. Maybe I just want to look for the changes today. Here's all the changes. If you see any out there, like you wouldn't want your system to look like this. This change that I put in November is not reflected in any of my reporting. That's bad. So you don't want old ones sitting here, unless they're either getting deleted or they're getting imported. So on this job here, here's the one that we did together. It is showing just a brief synopsis or a summary of what the change is for, what job it's for, change order number, total cost, and total contract change. We would then select the import box here to finalize it, and then click the import button to save or finish this. Several steps to get here, but that's it on the Foundation side. There isn't any other action you need to take that created the change order record. If I go back here, go into where I would create change orders in Foundation, there it is. Comment box is that scope of work section where I type that 32,000 character description. Distribution tab is my budget breakdown. So there's my $8,000 broken down along with my 80 hours and then my total. So all this comes over and updates the Foundation accounting system. Question came in here that says, if you delete a change order from this screen, how does HQ know about it? Or is there some sort of notification that goes into HQ? I feel like I give this answer a lot, but yes and no. There's not any notification. We're not actually approving. It's not a formal approval process. We're not rejecting the change order. We're either pulling it into Foundation or not. You can make the argument that's an approval process, and I guess I couldn't really argue with you, but it's not quite the same as what we do to approve time cards or revise or approve AP invoices, for example. So there's not like a rejection notice that goes out, is my point. However, if we look at the list of RFCs, it does show here if the RFC has a change order created for it in Foundation. So that would be your indication. If you have a bunch of RFCs here that do not show a linked change order, then something's wrong. There also, I believe, is, and this might be the easier way of doing it too, so looking at the list of RFCs, you can see what RFCs were linked to change orders that are in Foundation. There's not really a notification of that. There is a change order variance report. So we do have some reporting that shows that in the reporting section here. You have change order variance. And so this is designed with that kind of goal in mind. Anything that maybe is in one system and not the other. If you enter a change order just in Foundation, it's not going to show in HQ, so it'll show those differences. If you were to delete a change order, we'd have it in HQ and not in Foundation. So those would show on the change order variance report. Other question that came over here says, how do you attach the PDF to the change order in Foundation? You just would have to do that manually with document imaging if you wanted that. Ideally, the signed executed change order would live in HQ and in Google Drive. Once you get the change order signed and sent back to you, you can upload that through ProjectHQ and save it on the change order record there. And the attachments are not being passed into Foundation. So the change order variance report here would show, for example, here's what's in ProjectHQ, here's what's in Foundation for those change orders. And of course, I picked that one job. That's the only change order we have. This will be more meaningful. So I had some change orders that were created in Foundation only, so they don't show here in HQ, therefore there's a variance. Change order has not been pushed to Foundation. This is what shows right here. Change order has not yet been synced in Foundation change order sync. So this is your notification. If you run this variance report, you would see that variance in this. The second request for change, here's what that one looks like. I just want you to see the line items here. So that's the difference. The body of this form, it still has that description where I would potentially type in my scope of work and whatnot, and I could do a paragraph there still, but this one prints my line items. So I can see here, and this is the one that prints quantity and unit of measure and unit price. The other form excludes these three columns, but this shows a little bit more detail. So if whoever's approving this needs to see this info, they're going to get that from this change, or from this form, I should say. So there's definitely a lot of variation to the entry here. I usually tell people when I'm training this, and I kind of struggle with the training on this, not because I don't get it, just because there's so many different ways of entering it. So if you have additional questions, or there's you want to take some time and kind of go through this one-on-one, maybe go through your exact scenario where you're entering a change order and you want to see how to get that in there, you can reach out to myself or to the ProjectHQ support team, and we can definitely help you out with that more one-on-one. I do want to leave a little bit of time for questions here, any additional questions that came in. So we did our RFC, created it as pending, we emailed it, we got it approved, converted that RFC into a change order, pushed that change order into Foundation. So now it's updating in my accounting and it's reflected in all of my reporting and all of my numbers. So at that point, that change order is effectively completed from the HQ side. So if that is all I have for content for today, I will try to answer some of the questions here that are going into the question box before we run out of time. If you guys have any questions, feel free to fire those into the question box. If you don't have any questions and you don't care to stay to listen to any of these answers, you are free to go. I don't have any other content for you today. All right, so Michael asks, there seems to be an issue in trying to use the same ID number on a change order from an approved RFC, an issue which does not occur in Foundation. RFC number 101 is approved, but I want to convert that to change order 101. Save the change order as number 1. Foundation. So basically, you want your change order and your RFC to have the same number, but it was preventing you. Should not do that. You can have the RFC numbering and the change order numbering are separate sequences of numbers, and you would inherently have overlap with those. RFC 1, change order 1, RFC 2, change order 2. So if I enter I'm going to make this 101. Put in the bare minimum just so I can save it. We're going to mark it as approved so I can convert it. You really don't need much to create one of those. So we have RFC 101. We're now going to convert this to a change order. Change this number to 101. Put in a status and save. Yeah, I don't know, Michael, if you have a specific example of that. Maybe there's something else going on there, but the RFC numbers and the change order numbers can be the same. So if I'm understanding that question correct, you might have something else going on or something unique in that entry that you're referring to. RFCs will not sync to Foundation. Just the change orders update the accounting. Michael asks, is just a general HQ question, is OneDrive or Dropbox or Google Drive better than the other? My personal preference is Dropbox. I think there's a little bit, they're almost exactly the same. There's one thing that Dropbox does that the others don't, which is creates the folders as soon as the job is set up. All right, and then is there a way to have the budget auto update? So if you make a change in Foundation or when opening the budget window in PHQ, it always refreshes on its own. At this time, no. We're definitely trying to work towards that and come up with some more automated way of doing that. But at this time, you do have to click the button in order to sync that budget. And then the one that I skipped here, just to answer those other ones, is it possible to edit an approved change order in PHQ that has been synced to Foundation? So if we go to our change orders, that one was closed. Here's that. We can edit this. You can. It will allow you to make these changes. It will allow you to change this, but you're going to create a variance. Any changes that you make here, it's not going to automatically sync that back to Foundation if you already have the change order in Foundation. So that would potentially create a variance on the variance report, which would then tell you, hey, you need to go update your change order in Foundation. So I guess my direct answer on that, the question being, is it possible to edit a change order in HQ after it's been pushed to Foundation? You can, but I wouldn't. We want to push the approved change orders into Foundation. Ideally, they're not having any changes made. And if you have to make changes, you would have to make them in both systems. It's not an automatic syncing back and forth between the two. So if you make a change in one, it's not updating that in the other. So not ideal, but it will allow you to do that. Probably the best thing to do there would be to purge the change order out of Foundation, make your changes in HQ, and then resync it. Otherwise, you're going to be entering in both systems. All right. Any other questions? Last chance here. If you have any, go ahead and fire them into the question box in the GoToMeeting. All right. Well, it looks like no more questions. We'll change it. Problem is that if you haven't received the formal change order to work for the work that you've been given written direction to proceed. That's always a tough one. I know that happens everywhere, but shouldn't you not start the work until the change order has been approved? You know, so that there's definitely some give and take there. Right. It would not come up on the financial reports in Executive HQ or in Foundation until the change order is pushed into Foundation. And yes, this recording will be available. The meeting here, the webinar was recorded, and we will email you a link to that and make sure that we get that out to you guys. All right. Well, I thank you guys very much for joining us. That is our time for this webinar. If you guys have any questions or need anything else, you can reach out to support or myself directly, and have a great rest of your day.